The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got. They're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
What my scratchy voice didn't need last night was a very loud and raucous Maryland basketball game, which ended in crushing defeat. And we will get to that. We'll look at all the gory details of what happened last night. There was some good, and there was some real good, particularly when it came to the crowd last night. A resurgence of Maryland basketball, but ooh, what a way to lose that game. You've probably heard by now that Gene Hackman passed away. He was found dead in his home along with his wife and the dog. It's under investigation, but they say that no foul play is suspected. Gene Hackman starred in what I consider to be the greatest sports movie I ever saw. Did it stay true to the facts? No, it didn't. Unlike Miracle, which was also a great movie, and we talked about this on Monday with the anniversary of the gold medal for the U.S. Olympic team in 1980, they didn't really need to take any liberties. The story was just so good, they could tell it as it was. But there were some liberties taken with Hoosiers, but it stands up as a great sports movie to watch. And the hair still stands up on the back of my neck when he says things like, my team is on the floor and, one ball, 5 players, just a really good representation of a period of time when sports in America were a lot simpler. And last night, it was pretty complex in how you look at this game. I have known the Oshinsky family since I was 8 years old. One of my best friends in life is John Oshinsky, who I've known all my life. And I spent a lot of time with his family, and his family very much invested in the University of Maryland because he and his 2 brothers, 2 of his 5 siblings, went to Maryland before him. And I went to a bunch of events with them and games and so forth. So I've been entrenched in Maryland sports largely because of them. I went to a game with my dad in 1972 that I remember where, John Lucas was a freshman and have been really a big Maryland basketball fan, somewhat of a football fan. It's been kind of spotty when they've had really good football teams. But the basketball has been a passion around here. And look, in the early 70s, after the Senators left town, before the Bullets got here, before the Caps were formed in 1974, we had basically 2 things here. We had the Redskins and we had Maryland basketball. And nothing else came close on the radar. Nothing even remotely close to that. And so over the years, and those being the formative years of my life in my early teens, those are things that have been near and dear to my heart. So it made my heart feel good last night. His brother Stan graduated from Maryland, I believe 1975, if I'm not mistaken. So, 50 years ago. That he had gotten a whole bunch of tickets and took some friends and family and was nice enough to invite me to what was one of the biggest Maryland basketball games in years. You got Michigan State at number 8, Maryland number 16. Both teams are going to be in the tournament. But, this is important for seeding and would have really helped Maryland for seeding had they won that game. And did they come darn close to doing it. But we got there very, very early. And we got there early enough to see something that was a very common sight back in the days of Cole Fieldhouse. Students lining up to get in the building to claim their seats. And we haven't seen that in a long time. In fact, it got to the point, even when they were still in the ACC, that in order to get a student ticket to go to the Duke game at the end of the year, you had to show up at other games to kind of punch your ticket so you could go to that game. They were basically bribing you to go to a big game. And this was a big game, which everybody wanted to go to. And the place filled up. These 6:30 games are tough because the Beltway is so crowded and it's tough to get there on time. But the crowd seemingly was in place at tip-off. And I looked around by the middle of the first half, and there was not a seat that was open. And you had an interesting setup with the way they did some students in black shirts and some in red shirts. We were apparently in a red section, so I was wearing a red shirt. And it really looked great, and it was incredibly loud. And it really felt like the days when Maryland basketball was it, when Lefty Drizel would come out of the tunnel and give the peace sign, or Gary Williams would pump his fist and the place would go crazy. They have been in that building in Xfinity Center for over 20 years. They moved there right after the national championship in 2002. And the building has taken on a similar feel to Cole. Now, it doesn't have that great old-timey feel. You know, Cole was probably built in the 1930s. This was built in the early 2000s. But they had a big game early on. I think they beat number 1 Florida there, and that really helped to kind of christen the place. So when the place is full, as it was last night, it was rocking. It was absolutely rocking. And we saw an ending that, I mean, you just shake your head. I've gotten to know Gary Williams a little bit over the years, and like a lot of very accomplished people, especially coaches, they remember the bad losses far better than they do the big wins. And not that winning the national championship isn't a big deal for Gary Williams, and not that winning the ACC title, beating Duke coming from behind in 2004 isn't a big deal. But he has said he will take this to his grave. And this is what happened on March 21st, 15 years ago, 2010, second round of the NCAA tournament. Maryland had won the regular season title in the ACC, and they're playing Michigan State, Big Ten, Tom Izzo, the coach, and Maryland was way behind. They come back. They take a lead on a Grievous Vasquez layup. They go up by 1, and then you'll hear this happen.
Taking it right at Morgan, right at Raymar Morgan. 6.6 left. Draymond Green finds Lucius for the win. He got it! Spartans move to the Sweet 16.
And if you watch the video, it's Draymond Green throwing the ball to Corey Lucius on the right side of the key. And the only reason that Corey Lucius is in the game is because Kalen Lucas got hurt in the first half. So he's a sub playing in there. Draymond Green throws it across the top of the key where there's another player there, and he ducks. And Gary will say, have you ever heard of a player ducking? He ducks. And the ball goes to Lucius. He hits the three-pointer, and Michigan State moves on. Maryland would have gone to the Sweet 16 with a win, and that team, I think, had potential to get to the Final Four. They probably had a really good chance to get there, but did not. And that, to this day, haunts Gary Williams and probably will haunt him for the rest of his life. This one, last night, guess what? This was the first time that Michigan State did this since what happened 15 years ago.
Rebound, Gillespie, shot clock turned off. No timeouts left for Maryland. They got to go. Gillespie for 3. Goal or no. Holloman looks the clock. Half court for the win. Oh! Oh, my goodness. Holloman from half court to win it on the road.
Oh, Trey Holloman, Corey Lucius. Trey Holloman, bad shooting night. He was 0 for 3 on threes prior to that, 2 for 11 from the field. But when he needed to hit the shot, he hit the shot. And, you know, some of it is coaching that Michigan State knew what to do. They got the ball right up the court. Now, you know, hitting a 65-footer to win the game, I mean, it's just mind-blowing, especially a guy who had a terrible shooting night. But that's college basketball, and you just got to live with it. But it's remarkable that the last 2 times that Michigan State has won a game at the buzzer on a 3, both times were against the University of Maryland. Different coaches, Gary Williams 15 years ago. Last night, it was Kevin Willard who had to watch that shot go down.
Something that hopefully we'll get better at, and, you know, you got to take the last shot there, and I think Kobe, we had fought so hard to come back. Got a great rebound, got the push. And then, you know, that's just a tough way to lose a game. But give them credit. They got back. They came back, and Holloman hadn't made a shot all night, so once he released it, I knew that thing was going in.
Yeah. that's coaching too. Jacoby Gillespie, he's been around. He's played at other places. This wasn't his first rodeo, and you got to know that if you got a tie game and you got the momentum because they come from 7 points down, that you take the last shot and you make damn sure it's the last shot. But it wasn't the last shot. Michigan State got the rebound. Michigan State hit the 65-footer. Michigan State wins the game in what was an ugly game all around. The defense of Michigan State was stifling, and Maryland shot the ball horribly. They were 4 for 20 from 3, 31% overall for the game, both season lows for a team that's really shot the ball well this year. And Izzo's team, this is something that Kevin Willard had warned about going into this game, that they play hard on every possession, and they were ready to battle it out, leaving Izzo to say something that I think takes a little bit of chutzpah to say, that when you win a game on a 65-foot shot at the buzzer, you deserve to win.
If any of you ever saw a rock fight, or you didn't see a rock fight, you saw one tonight. I'm not sure either coach was happy with their performance in the first half. I know I wasn't happy with the 9 turnovers. I give a lot of the credit to them. I give some of the blame to us. But the second half, I hate to say it because I thought Kevin did a phenomenal job. He got him back in the game. We made a couple of bonehead plays, but I felt we deserved to win the game. I don't think it was a lucky shot at the end. I thought we played inspired basketball.
You really want to say you don't think it was a lucky shot? If you went to an open gym and you gave Holloman 20 shots from 65 feet, how many do you think he'd hit? 3? 2? Come on. I don't think it was a lucky shot. Now, Maryland screwed up. I mean, there's no question. Jacoby Gillespie should not have shot the ball with that much time on the clock, though there are some coaches who might make an argument for that. You got 2 big men in there with Reese and Queen. Queen had really bad night, shot threes. He can't shoot threes. But Reese has played very well for them this year. Remarkable turnaround from last year. I've rarely seen a player improve from his junior year to senior year like he has. And, if he gets the rebound and he tries to go back up and gets fouled, unlike last year when he was a liability at the line, you couldn't even put him in at the end of games where you knew the other team was going to foul. He's like a 70% free throw shooter this year. So they would have had a shot. So, you did hear Willard say that he should not have shot the ball at that time. He shot with too much time left on the clock. But that's his philosophy on it. Some coaches might feel a different way. Either way, Maryland winds up with just a crushing loss. But Willard is looking for the silver lining in this.
I think the only thing it's going to be good for us is as you get into postseason play, it's not, as I told the team, I'm like, you got to switch this is going to be a grind-out game. It's not always going to be able to run up and down and make shots, and sometimes you have to switch the mode a little bit and realize it's going to be a grind out and you're not going to have your offense going and you still got to play. And I thought, for the most part, as bad as we played offensively, these guys still brought great effort and gave us a chance to win.
Last one, did you feel you needed more from your bench, or were you satisfied with what you got there?
I thought Deshaun and Jordan played great. I know we don't have any bench points, but there's just not a whole lot of shots to go around with those first 5. Those first 5 are all guys that can score. So. Yeah. There's no one on that starting 5 that I'm not going to tell to shoot. So I don't know where the shots are going to come from.
Yeah, but here is a problem with the bench scoring. Michigan State got 20 points off the bench, and Maryland played most of the first half without one of their scorers. Selton Miguel, who has played very well lately, especially, and is capable of getting you 20 points in any game. He played only 23 minutes last night, and he had just 6 points. And they played most of the first half without him. Now, this was talk about a rock fight. This was a really ugly first half. Each team scoring in the 20s in the first half, but they could have used him. I thought that was a real problem for them because they just don't have any bench scoring. They don't have anybody coming off the bench who can score points for them. And Michigan State did, and that's going to be an Achilles heel for them going into the tournament, that if you do have one of your starters in foul trouble, you don't have any scoring off the bench to supplement that. Now, Willard's point is, well, you got 4 other guys who can score, which is true. But last night you had 4 other guys going through a bad night. So this could be a preview of what could conceivably happen in a very negative way for them in the tournament. On the other hand, the starting 5 in a situation where all teams shorten their bench, that's what happens in the tournament, they have a shot to go to the Final Four. I know it's hard to say that after a crushing loss from last night, but that is a possibility for this team. The most crushing loss, though, that I can remember during the regular season, later that year, Maryland blew a 22-point lead against Duke in the Final Four, but at least they got to the Final Four, and Duke went on to win the national championship. But during that season, I remember watching this in my hotel room in Tampa. It was the night before the Super Bowl, and Maryland was playing against Duke at Cole Fieldhouse. And they was this 2001? Yeah, maybe it was 2001. That was right, because they won the national championship in 2002. So it was 2001, and they were playing Duke, and Blake fouled out with 54. Well, it's a little more than that. He fouled out with a couple of minutes to go, and Drew Nicholas had to play the point, and he really wasn't ready to play the point. And Maryland blew a 10-point lead with 54 seconds left to go. They sent the game to overtime, and Duke won. I mean, it's just incredible what happened down the finishes. Maryland couldn't handle the ball, steal after steal, and Duke hit big shots, and they won the game. And I said, I don't think they're going to win a game the rest of the year. And my buddy Chris Nockey said to me, well, if you'd ever put on a jock, you'd know how foolish that sounded. But Maryland went on to lose a home game against a really bad Florida State team. The next game, the fans booed. Gary got on the PA and kind of let him have it after the game. It was a radio show being broadcast live to the crowd, and he said, you can't boo college guys, and it looked like a disaster. But they righted the ship, and they got to the Final Four, and they lost to Duke, but that sharpened them up, and the next year they went on to win the national championship. I'm not saying this team is capable of that or even making the Final Four, but sometimes in a season where you have just a devastating loss like that, as you hear Willard say, that might actually help you. Certainly, Kobe Gillespie will not be taking a shot with time left on the clock in that situation. Jacoby Gillespie will not be doing that, I don't think, the rest of the season. But anyway, great night overall in College Park. You got to say, the kid hit the shot when he needed to hit the shot, and just an atmosphere that you hope can continue in College Park, because when it's rocking like that, there is really nothing else like that. You got a big college football game maybe sometimes. We don't really have that level around here, but maybe like an SEC game. But a college basketball game in late February against the top 2 teams in the conference, or 2 of the top teams in the conference, that's as good an atmosphere as you can find in sports. And it was really a rockin' night last night in College Park. All right, combine stuff. Dan Quinn spoke yesterday. We'll go through his comments and what a difference a year makes in the Players Association survey. We'll explain that more next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, NFL looking at some changes. One of them is a no-brainer that they now have the technology to spot the football, not 2 fat guys running out on the field with chains, and Gene Steratore putting an index card in between the football and the first down marker to tell you how close it is. They can actually do this with a chip in the football and the electronic technology to make that happen. So that's a good thing. Overtime rules that they're going to tweak again. Not so thrilled about that, but I'll get to more on that at 10 o'clock. A little bit of combine stuff from yesterday. We had Adam Peters, the general manager, talking on Tuesday, and yesterday it was Dan Quinn, the head coach. I have been to many coach news conferences over the years and watched many more on Zoom and on online and so forth. Dan Quinn does something that I haven't seen coaches do before. Often a coach will just get up there and say, all right, what do you got? Fire away. What he likes to do, and he writes out some notes, or I guess he doesn't prepare a speech or anything, but he's got some things that he likes to say every time he meets the media. It's like an opening statement that he makes, and that was no exception yesterday as he talked to reporters both locally and nationally at the Combine, and this is how he opened up the session.
Last year, standing here, I didn't know what I didn't know about our team, and the most important thing that I know now, that's the definition of a commander, and that makes this week even more purposeful in a lot of ways, because now that Adam and I aren't just picturing it, we've actually seen it, and that's a really big deal. So starting this process last year, we had a hell of a draft class, and we're looking forward to following up on that for this year, especially now that we know who we are even more clearly. It makes this process even stronger. Our rookies played real time and had significant roles for us last season. We counted on them as teammates, not as rookies, and that started from the day they walked in the door.
As you get older, the years just fly by, So last year at the Combine seems like yesterday to me. But think about this. When Dan Quinn talks about being at the Combine last year, free agency had not opened. They hadn't had the draft, of course, because that's what the Combine is all about, helping you make your draft picks. So the team that he would have been talking about a year ago at the Combine was nothing like the one they put on the field in September. They turned over pretty much half the roster. And, they had no idea that Jaden Daniels was going to be this good. They didn't have Jaden Daniels on the roster. So, the team he's talking about now, boy, what a difference from the one he talked about last year. And what a remarkable job that he and the entire organization did in making it a difference of night and day from 2024 to 2025 with this team, and there is no greater evidence of that than the annual Players Association survey, where players are asked anonymously, but are asked about what the team does best in terms of culture and the atmosphere that they have, ownership, coaching. For example, Woody Johnson, the owner of the Jets, got an F- this year. Dan Snyder would get an F- every year. Last year, in the overall survey of the team, they got the worst grades of any team in the NFL. Well, now they're up to 11. And you had last year Josh Harris responding to the grades that they got, and he said, I'm not an F- guy. And he went out and he proved it this year, and things have gone way up. They got an F- for family treatment. That's now a B+. Travel amenities went from an F to an A. And then, of course, Dan Quinn got enormously high marks, as did the ownership, as they should. And, this family services, I don't know if you read the long piece that Don Van Natta did prior to Dan Snyder announcing that they were going to look for investors and or sell the team. Thank God they sold the team. But this goes back a couple of years, and one of the stories in there was about a wife of a player, and the wives sit in the same section, and even the older players on the team are in their early 30s, so they have young families. They have, in many cases, kids who are still in diapers. And so one of the wives, she wasn't named, but she had gone to Tanya Snyder. Snyder's wife got more involved once the heat got turned up on Dan. Remember, he named her associate owner or something like that, trying to save his butt, which fortunately didn't do. But she had gone to Tanya Snyder, and she said, look, there's a lot of wives with young kids sitting in this one section. There's just one bathroom that's closest to us. Could you put a changing station in there? Any airport that you go into, almost any public restroom in any place has a changing station. It's 2025. And she said, no. Tanya Snyder said, no, we're going to be moving to a new stadium soon. She said, how much could it cost? $5,000? I'll pay for it. No, don't do it. So they addressed a lot of these things, and so now the survey moves the team from what had been 32nd last year to number 11, and even the things that kept them from being in like the top 4 or 5 was a stadium, which, is nothing they can do about for a while. They pumped $75 million into just make it inhabitable, but, until they move into the new place, likely 2030, this is the way it's going to be. But this was Dan Quinn's reaction to seeing his team skyrocket in the Players Association survey.
The first thing I thought of, I was pleased to see treatment of families, and that goes to Josh, honestly, and Adam. There's no gap in between what he says and what he does. And so to have that type of reflection in a year is really big. We told him how important this was to us. He heard that from the players and then took action on that. And I think that's honestly like what that relationship has been for us. What do you need to win, and how do we go about and do that? And so to see things like family support and having that increase, that's really big. The families, our families, players, coaches, the organization, they make a lot of sacrifices for us to do what we can do. And so to have that right there, team travel, all those, to me, just reflect back to Josh and the vision of what it can be. And I couldn't be more proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, and Quinn is a part of it in the way that he understands that it's not just the football team, it's the entire organization. And I may have passed this on before, but my nephew is on the training staff of the Atlanta Falcons. And I had texted him when Quinn got hired, and I said, what should I know about him? And he basically said I'd walk through fire for him. He wasn't coached by him. He just observed him. He's worked under several different coaches in the time he's been with the Falcons. And he said, this is a guy who people will go to war for because of the way he's got your back, the way and we saw it last year, the culture building, all those things. And so to see the survey basically turn around in 1 year, you got to give Quinn a lot of credit for it. You got to give Peters a lot of credit for it, too. You got to give, certainly Josh Harris credit for it, opening up his checkbook. One of the things Peters said, remember, I don't know if you heard this story, Peters got hired first. They hired Peters and then they hired Quinn. So this was early January of 2024. And he was brought in with some snow on the ground. And he looked out the window of one of the offices and he saw what looked like an artificial turf field. And he says, what is that? And they go, oh, yeah, that's an artificial turf field. It's been there for decades. Yeah, Dan Snyder was too cheap to take it out. It costs a lot of money to remove it, but they took it out. Not so much that they needed that space for another field. It's just that was a symbol of what the organization was. It was like a once proud building that had fallen in disrepair and nobody done anything to upgrade it. It was disgusting. And it trickled down to the football team. Well, you go from a 4-win season to a 12-win season. That's got something to do with it. That certainly plays a factor in that, and the survey did this. Something else I'm picking up on here a little bit. I don't know how big a deal this is going to be, and not that there's going to be this enormous bidding war for Bobby Wagner, but Bobby Wagner was a big addition to this team on and off the field. He had 100 tackles. He was healthy all year. He was an enormous leader for this football team. And he's a free agent now. They signed him to a 1-year deal because at 34, they didn't really know how much he had left. Had they known, I guess they would have worked out a longer-term deal, but you never know. Especially when players get older, they can fall off a cliff and, you can have an injury which will severely alter your career. But fortunately, that didn't happen. So it sounds like there's a little bit of a recruiting war going on between Dan Quinn and his former boss, and Pete Carroll. And Pete Carroll, as you know, is now the coach of the Raiders after being out of the NFL last year. And at 73, he's back, and he knows Bobby Wagner because when Dan Quinn was his defensive coordinator and Bobby Wagner was a young player, all three of them together won a Super Bowl. So unprompted at his news conference yesterday, Dan Quinn said this.
Somewhere, I had not talked to him today, but Bobby Wagner is somewhere getting better today. And I don't know where it is or what it looks like or how he's doing it, but that's the type of attitude that we want to chase. Constant improvement, digging for it hard, and if he can do it, then everybody else in the organization kind of follows suit into that space. So that's Jaden, that's all of his teammates, that's me. We're never arrived, and that's how we want to go after it as hard as we can. We're going to work our ass off to relentlessly improve and get better in a lot of ways this year.
Bobby Wagner just happened to come up. Pete Carroll, the other day at his news conference, said this about his former player.
I thought it was a remarkable season that he had. in many ways. I know he was a great asset to Danny, putting together the system and the approach and the principles and stuff. We all kind of grew up in the same ways, and so the message and the voice that Bobby had on that club, and particularly with the quarterback, the relationship that he's established, was irreplaceable for them. And so, I know Bobby is he's a free agent.
Free agent. Aha. Yeah. And that led Dan Quinn in his little, what they call scrum with the beat reporters, to say this about Wagner.
Bobby was certainly one of those as a driving factor in that. And so he was a really important piece to what we did. Any comments on him? You have to talk to his agent.
Understand.
He is his agent.
As an observer,
I've been waiting to say that so long.
Yeah. So, Bobby Wagner is his own agent. So there's no behind the scenes reaching out to an agent. I mean, this is a really interesting situation. Bobby Wagner is a free agent. You can talk to your own free agents. You can do that. I think the opening of the league year is like in 2 weeks, and that's when it's ollie oxen free. Do what you want. But this is Dan Quinn clearly wanting to send a message to Bobby Wagner, who is his own agent. Yeah, we'd like to talk to your agent about working out a new deal, right? And Pete Carroll is going, oh yeah, Bobby Wagner, he's a free agent, isn't he? So. Now, how much are you going to pay for a guy who's 35 years old? I don't know. And the question I think that's got to be answered by Bobby Wagner himself, who until this year had spent his entire life on the West Coast. He had gone to school on the West Coast. He had played with the Seahawks. He had played with the Rams. And Vegas, not far from, I guess you would consider Vegas West Coast. Would that be a possibility, going to work for someone he's worked with before and went to 2 Super Bowls? So keep an eye on the Bobby Wagner situation, but it sounds like there may be a little bit of a tug-of-war going on between Pete Carroll and Dan Quinn, who are friends and have worked together before, but, of course, are very much competitors. And I think, Quinn would love to have him back, but I think in Carroll's case, he might be looking at Bobby Wagner for his team as he looks to rebuild with the Raiders in the same way that Quinn was looking at Wagner as a culture setter and things like that when he took over with the Commanders this past year. And by the way, speaking of the Raiders, this whole Tom Brady thing on what he's allowed to do as the number one analyst for Fox and what he's allowed to do as whatever the title he is. He's a part owner of the Raiders, let's put it that way. And he's been involved in the Pete Carroll coaching search, and he will be very involved in their quarterback situation, whatever it's going to be. And Matt Stafford's name has come up. Now, the Rams have given Stafford the okay to look for a deal. They apparently would like to have him back, but it's all about the contract. And what do you know? Just recently, Tom Brady and Matt Stafford happened to run into each other unplanned at a ski resort in Montana, according to the NFL Network. Unplanned. Oh, fancy meeting you here. Hey, would you like to have a cup of coffee? Or, in Brady's case, have a bowl of avocado ice cream and discuss the possibility of going to the Raiders. Right? I mean, so I don't know how the league looks at Brady, but it does seem to be an unfair advantage. If he's on TV all the time talking about these guys, he can't go to practices, he can't go to the meetings yet. Oh, hey, what do you know? Matt Stafford, fancy running into you. So, I don't know. Kirk Cousins, that's a mess. And it's been a mess here in a different way. It was a mess in that they totally botched a contract extension for him. They could have gotten him for $19 million a year, which soon became a big bargain. But instead, Bruce Allen decided to publicly embarrass him, and they put him on the franchise tag twice, wound up letting him walk for nothing when they could have traded him for a first-round pick with the 49ers when Kyle Shanahan wanted him. But according to Jay Gruden, Dan Snyder didn't want to deal with Shanahan out of spite. I mean, just the total stupidity that went on there. So goes on to Minnesota. He plays well, but they win only one playoff game, gets hurt. Then he signs this enormous deal with the Falcons last year, and now he's kind of an albatross with guaranteed money. Tony and Mike on Cousins yesterday.
Yesterday at the Combine, head coach Raheem Morris and GM Terry Fontenot both said the Falcons were unaware Cousins had throwing arm injury down the stretch, which Cousins recently announced. Right now, the team plans to go with Michael Penix as a starter, Cousins as the backup. How does this situation sound to you, Tom?
It sounds impossible. It sounds untenable. It sounds like there's mutual distrust. Cousins is saying, I got hurt, and the Falcons are saying, we didn't know he got hurt. How is that possible? He didn't tell them? He didn't go in for therapy? He hid his injury? Or are they saying something to intimate that he's lying about his injury? Because if that's what they're intimating, then they don't want him on the field and they don't even want him in the locker room. And if he feels that they are saying something that is not true, he's not going to want to play for them. This is a classic cover your behind situation. And you know what's going to happen, Mike? They're all in for Penix now. And all they got to worry about is money. How much money do they owe him that they have to pay him? And how much dead money on a cap hit are they going to get? They will try to trade him. Nobody will go for the trade. So they'll pick out the one day in the calendar that is least onerous on the cap hit, and they'll release him that day.
Tony, I'm not going to disagree with any of that, but nobody held a gun to anybody's head in Atlanta's executive offices and told the Falcons to give up $100 million guaranteed money to a quarterback coming off a real injury. What? So, cover your blank is exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
But this is they did this. It's not like they inherited the team. Like they just sort of showed. They knew he was coming aboard. They knew what you like this. They knew what was happening. So when they drafted Penix, the whole thing just seemed weird. It seemed weird. You're going to spend $100 million in guarantees, and you're going to spend a pretty high pick, whatever it was, in the top 10 where Penix went, and use it on a quarterback. The whole thing was just bizarre. And this continues. This is a new chapter, and another calendar years we flip the page in bizarre.
Yes, it is. And, the situation here is interesting for quarterback. Marcus Mariota is a free agent, and I think they'd like to have him back. The circumstance couldn't have been any better last year. His mentoring, I think, he said it. Jaden Daniels couldn't say enough good things about Mariota, how he helped him along the way. And when Mariota got hurt, he came off the bench and blew out Carolina, and has also helped them to pull off the comeback win against the Cowboys in Dallas at the end of the year. He was exactly what they wanted for that spot. But he wants to play. He's not going to play here unless, God forbid, Daniels gets hurt. So he might want to be able to compete to start. And he's also got a home on the West Coast, and he may want to be closer to that than being on the East Coast. So if he does go, Kirk Cousins, Tony's right. They're going to cut him as soon as they can. And, you just wonder about this. Two sides to this. One, he's a good egg. He's a good guy, and he would come in understanding that role if that's. I'm sure he wants to play, but if there are no options to play, that might be a good situation for him for a team that, hold your breath, conceivably could go to the Super Bowl. Here's another thing that he might want to do. He's very careful with his words, so you'd never say anything like this. But when Kirk Cousins filled in for Robert Griffin III in their rookie years, that was 2012. That was when Griffin got hurt against Baltimore the week before, colliding with Haloti Ngata. They had a game with the Cleveland Browns, and I've gone through this before, that Griffin was declared out for the game, but warmed up before the game, and he and Dan Snyder, went to Mike Shanahan and said, he's ready to go. And Shanahan says, no, we're not going to play. We've got a game plan. Kirk has practiced. He's going to start the game. And Kirk won the game. And Griffin and his dad seethed because they didn't run the pistol, and they came up with the idea that they were trying to sabotage RG3's career, the Shanahans were, so that they could play Kirk Cousins, which was nonsense. But in the locker room, Dan Snyder comes bounding in after they won the game, and he blows right by Cousins' locker so he can go talk to Robert Griffin III. There was no love lost between the two of them. Cousins was under contract when he was here, and they kept him under contract by signing him to the 2 franchise tags. But there was never an agreement on an extension, and I can't imagine that he liked Dan Snyder in any way. Would that be kind of an interesting middle finger to Snyder if he came back here for a team that was really good? Would he be interested in doing that in sort of a little bit of a revenge tour? Now, no quarterback who's been a starter as he has for over a decade would want to be in a situation where he's coming in clearly as the backup to a quarterback who is one of the top quarterbacks in the league right now. But if there are no other options, that might be kind of a delicious, oh, yeah. Hey, Dan, how you doing out there? How's things on the yacht? Yeah, we got an organization here that's really good, and we got good coaching staff, and we got by the way, Dan, did I mention we got really good ownership here? That ownership that actually cares about the players, or all the players, not just the stars, your favorite stars like Clinton Portis, people that you liked, Robert for a while. Did you want that? Yeah, that might be something that might be fun for Kirk if there are no better options to play. Coming up in the next hour, more from Dan Quinn. Got some rules to talk about, and Judy Batista of the NFL Network on the Ravens situation with their kicker Justin Tucker. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. So you remember the Albert Brooks movie, Defending Your Life? We've now reached the point in the NFL where a coach has to defend a play which starts with the word tush. I would use tuchus. If it were up to me, I'd say tuchus. The tuchus push. But Nick Sirianni, coach of the Eagles, says, hey, don't ban that play. We work hard at it. Mark Schlereth, former offensive lineman, differs. Thinks it should go away. We'll get to that coming up. Judy Batista of the NFL Network on the situation involving Justin Tucker. His wife came out in support of him yesterday, but we'll see where the NFL goes with this. And also, hangover for Maryland from last night. Spent a lot of time on it in the first half. That's why my voice is even scratchier today. I was in College Park last night for what was, up until the last shot of the game, a wonderful night for Maryland. It really was. I mean, to get there early and see the students lining up, they fill the place, 6:30 game, which is sometimes half empty. By the time it starts, even in a conference game, it was filled up and it was rocking. That place was loud. And as a matter of fact, Jacoby Gillespie, who missed the shot with time on the clock, which gave Michigan State enough time to hit the buzzer beater, it was so loud in there when they had that possession. They had like 9 seconds left on the clock when they got the ball. In fact, I'm going to play this again. I know, you don't want to hear this, maybe if you're a Maryland fan, but maybe you can pick this up from the TV sound. I think that Gillespie may have launched the shot earlier than he wanted because he was just in like this tunnel of noise, which, maybe ramped him up. I don't know. I mean, he's an experienced player, and you did hear, Coach Kevin Willard say after the game that he thought he shot it too early. But just listen to this again, and you will hear, I think, just how incredibly loud it is when Maryland gets the rebound and has a chance to win the game with the ball in Gillespie's hands.
Rebound, Gillespie, shot clock turned off. No timeouts left for Maryland. They got to go. Gillespie for three. Goal or no. Holloman looks the clock. Half court for the win. Oh my goodness! Holloman from half court to win it on the road!
Yeah, and I think you can get an idea of just how quiet it got after the shot. But that sound, when they had the ball, Maryland did in the last seconds, man, that was loud. So, yeah, it was a crushing loss. It was tough. But that atmosphere that Maryland has missed for so many years, it's back. It was back for last night, and hopefully it's going to be back for a long, long time. I don't understand how you can be a student at Maryland and be a sports fan and not go to basketball games. I just think for many years that was one of the attractions of going to school there, going to Cole Fieldhouse and watching big games at Cole. And the atmosphere that they have at Xfinity, it can be just as good as it was last night. It was really a rocking place, and unfortunately a tough ending for the Terps. All right, Combine going on, and Dan Quinn spoke to the media yesterday, talked about the survey, which really bumped up in a big way for the Commanders. They finished last year. They got marks as low as F-, and Josh Harris said, I'm not an F- guy, and he went out and he proved it, and the facilities got great ratings, the ownership, the atmosphere, the way the families are treated, all those things went up. But the business of the Combine is now underway. It's Thursday, so we got the Underwear Olympics going on as the players are measured and weighed, and some of them are going to run 40s and bench press and all that stuff. There'll be some quarterbacks who will throw. It's just a way that they can get a beat on these guys. And remember, Ron Rivera didn't go 2 years ago. He didn't go to the Combine because he said, oh, yeah, we can get a lot more on film, and I don't really get anything out of the interviews. I'd rather interview them when they do their what they call 30 visits. Like each team is allowed to bring in a total of 30 players to interview at their own facility, and that's the way he wanted to do it. Dan Quinn is there, and Dan Quinn is anxious to get down to the business of talking to players.
There's no doubt for me the interactions, and this is my first time to hear their story, a little bit of their why, who the important people are in their life, the journey, and it speaks a lot of time to resilience and to team and to see why, they've accomplished so much. It could have been a family member, a friend, whatever that is. Usually it doesn't take too many degrees of separation to find out somebody. And so that's what today is, man. No stress on these guys. I just want to get to know them, man, get to find out. I want to hear a little bit about what they did in college, how they played ball, what their assignments were, how they communicated together. The tape in our interviews, we do almost 50-50 and split the time between background, a little bit of their story, and then get it onto the tape. So it's a great first step in that part of the communication. But what we have learned since 5 years ago, we can communicate a lot online. And a lot of coaches doing that. We do that with the ball players. And sometimes just those one-on-one times to get to talk. Hey, man, you can relax. It's an easy setting, man. You don't have to over-try. I just want to know who you are and how you get down. And so if I could get to that part first, and then you'd be surprised if you look back at your notes, somebody's on your team, hey, man, at the Combine, you told me about your little brother. You told me about the impact your mother had. That helps that connection start faster. And so that's what I love about this start of it.
So they, I imagine the interviews have already taken place or will. I don't know how they work those in, but that's they've got the Combine going on through Sunday, and everybody comes home and evaluates what they got. Meantime, rule talk, things to change in the NFL, and Troy Vincent said, quote, Troy Vincent, one of the league executives, and he's in charge of these kind of things. He says, I think it's time to rethink the overtime rule. Yeah, Troy, go back to the way it was when the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants played for the championship in 1958. Have a coin flip, team that scores first, they win the game, that's it. But over the years, they futzed with it so much. Fortunately, they haven't gone to the college rules. The college rules are terrible for overtime. And as they go on, they get even more ridiculous to the point where they exchange doing 2-point conversion tries. It just, play a football game and let's play 3 sets of tennis to decide who wins. It stinks. So the NFL, for many years, they started with the overtime in regular season, 1974, and you'd flip a coin. If you wanted to defend, you could, although it didn't make sense, but some teams actually did. But in most cases, you took the ball once you won the flip. And if you went down and kicked the field goal, you won the game. But if you didn't, you punted. The other team would have a chance to do it. And you kept playing for 15 minutes until somebody scored or the 15 minutes ran out and you had a tie. And one year, the Redskins had 3 ties in a season, 3 ties in a 14-game season. So this would, make ties very, very rare if you did that. And then they said, nah, it's not fair. We got to have both teams touch the ball. So if you kick a field goal, the game doesn't necessarily end. The other team gets the ball. They get to kick a field goal to tie, and then you keep playing or however you want to do it, or you get a touchdown, you win the game. And then it got to the point where we now have in the playoffs, if you score a touchdown, and that's the way it works now in the regular season, if you score a touchdown and win the flip, game's over. You score a touchdown after winning the flip in the playoffs, the other team still gets the ball. And so, that's how they decide. The problem is, if you want to convert that to the regular season, which is apparently the way they'd like to go, is in the playoffs you keep playing till somebody wins. And if it's 15 minutes, you play another quarter, start another quarter until somebody wins. Well, now they're talking about moving the overtime back to 15 minutes and having the same rules that they have in the playoffs, that if the other team, if the team winning the flip scores a touchdown, the other team gets the ball. It's just stupid. Just have a coin flip. Again, the team that was winning the flip was only winning like 50-some% of the time. It wasn't an overwhelming amount. Now, what they found since they shortened the overtime to 10 minutes, and they came up with this new rule that you would keep playing if you kicked the field goal or you'd end the game with a touchdown. Receiving teams won 56.8% of games in overtime from 2017 to 2024, up from 55.4% from 2001 to 2011. I mean, it went from 55.4 to 56.8, and they're panicking about this? Stupid. What they are going to do is they are going to use the technology to measure first downs instead of having these two fat guys run out with the chains and they try and spot the ball that way. They're going to have that as a backup, but they are going to have now a way that they can put a chip in the ball and use the technology that's in place to clearly spot where the football belongs on a first down. So that's good. They're also talking about using replay more to find things like face masks and things that you can't necessarily challenge. So I think that's a good thing. But the overtime, no, stinks. All right, coming up, we'll look at Gene Hackman, who passed away yesterday, or was found dead, I should say, at the age of 95, and I think was in the greatest sports movie that I've ever seen. Everybody has their opinions about what they like best, but you'd have a hard time convincing me that Hoosiers was not the best. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
You know, sometimes art is so good, it almost seems real. And many of us woke up this morning to the news that Gene Hackman and his wife and the family dog were found dead in their home in New Mexico on a welfare check. They are not suspecting foul play, according to the sheriff's office. What would, I think, come to mind first is carbon monoxide poisoning, but I don't know that. Don't know what happened. But Gene Hackman was 95 years old. His wife was only 63. So this is a real tragedy on multiple levels. But he was a terrific actor and starred in what I think was the greatest sports movie ever made, called Hoosiers. Came out in 1986. And Seth Davis, who covers college basketball, I believe he's still on CBS, he put out a tweet this morning saying, "R.I.P. Coach Norman Dale. You loved the game and coached it for all the right reasons. And in the most important moment of your career, you trusted your players. That's what it's all about." And he's, of course, referring to the scene where Jimmy Chitwood says, "I can make that shot." And he changes the play. He says, "Okay, Jimmy, you make the shot." And he made it. And I was talking about this movie on Monday in relation to the movie Miracle, which chronicled the Miracle on Ice in 1980, the U.S. Olympic hockey team, where you didn't have to make any changes. The story was so good, even though it was a Disney movie, you didn't have to futz with the script much. And when you produce a movie, you're under no obligation to the real story. It's not a documentary, it's a movie. And there was little that they had to do because the story was so incredible. The shot that Seth Davis is talking about, the Jimmy Chitwood shot, I actually interviewed Bobby Plump, who is the real-life person who Jimmy Chitwood was modeled after. He did lead his school to a championship. This was when was the Open tournament in Indiana. They don't have this anymore. Like all levels, all small schools could play big schools, and a small school won. And Bobby Plump hit the winning shot. But he said to me, that was the only thing in the movie that was accurate. He said there weren't 6 players on the team. Pee Wee didn't knock down a couple of free throws to keep our season alive. We didn't have 4 players on the floor. There was no coach coming to the team that year. The coach had been there the year before. The star player, being Bobby Plump, wasn't sitting out at the beginning of the year and didn't agree to play until there was a town meeting where they were going to throw Normandale out. All those things didn't happen. But you can do that when you have a movie. It was a movie based on a real life event, but it was a story of fiction. Whereas the movie Miracle was based on an actual life event, and it could stay true to the story. But Hackman, who had a great movie career up until that point, and it hit, I think, something of a lull. And he said when he made the movie, he said he thought it might end his career. He didn't understand what it could become. The film instead was widely praised. It was voted the best sports movie of all time by the Associated Press in 2020 and is the number 4 sports film according to the American Film Institute. I mean, and you can make your own arguments as to what you feel is the best, but this one just works for me. And this is one of my favorite scenes. This is when they make it to the state championship, and it's being played at Butler. Butler is in Indiana. Butler made it to the championship game back-to-back years, about 15 years ago. And so these are guys who have been playing in small school gyms, and now they're going to an arena that seats, 12, 13,000 people, and he doesn't want his kids to be overwhelmed by it. So he has one of his players put Pee-wee on his shoulders, and he takes a tape measure, and they measure the distance from the rim to the floor. Here's Hackman.
How far? 10 feet. 10 feet. I think you'll find it's exact same measurements as our gym back in Hickory. Okay, let's get dressed for practice.
Yeah, I mean that still sends chills up my spine. And then this is the locker room speech, and every sports movie has a great locker room speech with Herb Brooks, saying to his players, great moments are born from great opportunity. This is your time. Go out and take it. This was Normandale talking to his underdog Hoosiers team before they go out and play the big school from Indianapolis for the Indiana State Championship.
We're way past big speech time. I want to thank you for the last few months. It's been very special for me. Anybody have anything they want to say?
Yeah. Let's win this and for all the small schools who never had a chance to get here.
Okay.
I want to win for my dad. Let's win for Coach, who got us here.
Thank you.
With God of heaven, it is all one. To deliver with a great multitude or a small company. For the victory of battle standeth not in the multitude of hosts, but strength cometh from heaven.
And David put his hand in the bag and took out a stone and slung it. And it struck the Philistine on the head, and he fell to the ground. Amen.
How can you not like that? That's so great. That's the scene before the championship game in Hoosiers. One thing about Hackman, he went out kind of the way Johnny Carson did. Johnny Carson did The Tonight Show in 1992, his last show. And aside from, I think, one appearance on the David Letterman show briefly, like a walk-on, you never heard from him again. And Gene Hackman, who got a late start, he was in Bonnie and Clyde, his first big break when he was 35 years old, didn't win his first Oscar till he was over 40, retired in his mid-70s, about 20 years ago, still in demand for roles, and was seen occasionally, like picking up coffee or something like that in Santa Fe where he lived. But that was it. You put your work out there, the hay is in the barn, and that's it. So rest in peace, Gene Hackman, who gave us so many great movie moments. But for the sports world, the movie Hoosiers was one of the best. All right, Bram is coming up next. That's it for me. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.